Oh, it's really I can't say how much an honour it was, Anne, to be asked to speak here, and Andy, and thank you very much. And it was a real thrill, Fergal, to follow you actually, because Fergal, Andy, and are two young sports scientists that I worked with in the NCTC, and they made such a phenomenal difference to what we did, but I also believe to sport in this country. And this man is very modest. I mean, the chain effect of rowing in terms of performance culture in this country is not charted, but we know what it is in the NCTC because they were the first people in the door once we set up in 1991. And we knew within about 6 months that they were, frankly, the only high performance outfit in the country. And before too long, the reason the rugby guys wanted to work with them is they wanted to see what they were doing. Boxing followed, and several other sports came in as well. Athletics, Brian Kerr and the football guys, and really much of it was built on the back of that tremendous work, and Fergal was right at the centre of that with the rowers. So it's great to follow you, Fergal, and an absolute privilege to work with you. But you worked with us as well, Rhodey. I'm going to dispute that it was the sports science course where you met her, you know. I think it might have been down at the NCTC, but there you go. So look, it really is a great pleasure. And by the way, for those of you who want the short version of my talk, it's here in the PhD, right? And indeed, many of the people in this room wrote the story, didn't they? I mean, I'm telling a bit of the story, but many of the people in the room actually wrote it. Ian mentioned South Africa, and I was apologising to Mary earlier on that I can't stay terribly late tonight. I've just come back from South Africa after 2 weeks where I'm helping them on the South African coaching framework. But here's a sobering thought. In fact, I have 3 sobering thoughts to start off. Coming away from South Africa in 27,000 public schools, the majority of them attended by young black and Indian school children. There's no school physical education. And indeed in many of the schools that are outside of that, there is also no school physical education. And let me tell you that many of the people who are passionate about the development of sport and physical activity in South Africa would give more than their right arm to have a structured physical education program, but crucially, a quality college or institution to prepare those professionals. So sometimes we take things for granted, and it's really interesting in the history of our state, and this is a scary thought for John Logan and myself and a few others in the room who have moved on in years a bit. We could all be 35 years older than we are. You might say, what the hell did he mean by that? Well, buried in the bells of this study is a report, and quite a remarkable report, if you're ever into it, that was written in 1938, which recommended the establishment of a central institute of physical education in the relatively new Free State. Now, interestingly enough, it didn't happen, but let me tell you, if you read that report, its recommendations would probably read quite well today. It was unbelievably far-seeing, developed by a cross-departmental committee. Now, to understand why it wasn't, well, there was the small matter of a Second World War, but actually the other sobering thought, of course, is we might not be here at all, because through an interesting, as yet to be fully explained, a stroke of the pen, physical education was essentially deleted from our constitution as a statutory right of children in 1937. And of course we've yet to fully explain that, and it may well be part of the reason why not a lot happened at a state level in physical education until the doors opened here in 1973. At which point Joe and Liz jump up and say, but you forgot about Tralee and the Brandon Hotel in Tralee, where the whole thing started, and before that Strawberry Hill in London. But actually, you know something, the story from the point of view of physical education, and I want to record this, and sometimes we forget it in this institution, actually started before we got independence at all in Lynn College in Dublin, where there actually was a tradition of preparing physical education or PT instructors. They were female, and many of them over the years did an absolutely incredible job in delivering physical education. But then the other thing, of course, is that there was a knock on the door, and I spoke to the woman who answered the door, to quite an infamous figure in Irish history, particularly ecclesiastical history, John Charles McQuaid, who went around in the 1950s to Sion Hill and Blackrock in Dublin to suggest, shouldn't they set up a physical education college? And they took him to his word and set up Sion Hill College in the mid-1950s. And that indeed in itself also became a hugely influential college, again focusing on the preparation of female physical education teachers, and it also doing quite a brilliant job. For those of you, and there is one man in the room who can tell this story a lot better than I can, John Logan, but there is quite an interesting and I think very influential report. It was written in 1964. It's a lot bigger than that actually, John. I think there was about 7 volumes in it. It was called Investment in Education, written by the OECD. There was one line in the OECD report which said, there seems to be a deficiency of male physical education teachers in the Irish system. Now, the OECD report didn't do anything other than make that observation. But simultaneously, and I suppose by happy coincidence, a gentleman who will be here later on, Captain Michael McDonough, had recently been appointed to the Department of Education. And on the basis of the Investment in Education report, he wrote an internal report within the department suggesting that there was a need to look at the preparation of male physical education teachers. And actually for 3 years there was serious consideration given to the teachers being educated in England. In fact, they spoke to several colleges, including Strawberry Hill, that should take place. But in the end, it was decided that there should be a National College of Physical Education. The folklore goes that at an Ireland v Wales rugby match, sounds a bit like this year actually, Sean O'Connor, who was a senior official in the Department of Education, was sitting next to Brian Linehan, the Minister for Education, and they weren't too happy with the physical specimens that they saw on the pitch, and they said, we really need to do something about this. And Michael McDonough, in fairness, used the opportunity to, when there was a World Ishbur Conference here in 1968, to use that impetus to put the case again that there was a need for a National College of Physical Education. And you know, the rest, they say, is history. It took a number of years for it to happen, but it eventually did occur with the opening in 1973. So it was quite a journey, and the interesting thing to say is that both Ling and Sion Hill colleges closed down when the National College of Physical Education was established. So even though we're celebrating 40 years, I think it is important to understand that we're also building on, I suppose, a process, a heritage and a momentum that has gone on for much longer than that. So, Ian, you asked me the question. Just in case you asked me the question, I dug out a few historical documents. Here's, it's called Brunnu na Game, and for those of you who aren't into Irish, it's the conferring ceremony when I graduated in 1980. And Fergal, you very kindly mentioned Jacinta earlier on, and quite poignantly, her and my name are listed together on the graduation roll in that year. And you know, I think one of the things that I can say, Ian, you talked about my career to date. Unquestionably for me, those 4 years were hugely influential because of the experience that I had here. It was quite amazing to think, you know, in a young college, we got the hugely challenging experiences that we did, and I'm delighted to see some of the people here. Dave Waldick is up there, I see PJ, sorry if I'm missing anyone else, but there are many other names that I'd like to add to. But now, sorry if I get a bit emotional here in reading this. Two of my dearest colleagues and mentors have since passed away. One of them, Liam Dugdale, who was an absolute leader in his time, and he was certainly a great friend and mentor to me. So Liam was obviously in physical education, adult and continuing education, and indeed helped us with the whole setup of the PEAI and all of that. I mean, I just couldn't tell you what he did in terms of the whole thing. But another one whom, in my view, sometimes slips off the radar is Roderick Harrison, who was a lecturer in the sociology of education, and certainly he was hugely influential on me. But I was privileged after he died. I was asked by his wife, Darvel Ní Cortaigh, to say a few words at his memorial service, and I actually felt I would read you something from this because PJ, you're in this story as well. I just want, because this will give you an indication of the spirit and the way of business that was in the institution. I don't just tell it for Roderick, I tell it for that man there, I tell it for that man there, and that man there. This is the way it operated. For Roderick Harrison was to his students at once inspirational and, dare I say it, annoying lecturer. Inspirational because of the brilliance of his lectures and the clarity of his vision. Annoying in the best sense of the word because for students he presented the sociology of education and his other courses in such a challenging way that even the most laid back and complacent of them had to sit up and take notice. I am reminded of my first year in college in 1976 when I arrived, wet behind the ears, to the physical education degree course. With stars in my eyes, I was taken away with the methods and enthusiasm of the rather stern-looking sociology lecturer. And those of you who knew him could probably even hear his booming voice now if you take a moment to think about it. Soon we were to find out that he was not so stern after all, and to our astonishment he actually knew all our names within the first week of us being there. My colleague PJ Smith, who's here, tells the funny story of the amazement of the former rugby coach Eddie O'Sullivan when he was walking, one day after he arrived in college. Eddie was walking down the corridor when Roderick said on meeting him, "Hello, Eddie." And Eddie, of course, was gobsmacked. This guy even knew his name, but he almost collapsed then when he said, "How's the rugby going?" And this was, Roderick, who had this stern exterior, who was absolutely superb in what he did, but knew the students and knew what they were up to. But that exemplifies what went on here in those years. I mean, every one of the lecturers that were here, they all had their foibles. We all used to have a bit of a laugh at this, that, and the other, but they were absolutely superb in their dedication, their knowledge of their students, and the professional grounding that they gave. And so my career, which has included teaching, lecturing, leading CEO roles, and now work in the international sphere, some of with the IRB, by the way, I have drawn so strongly on that basic undergraduate degree. Sure, I've gone on and done masters and PhD, but unquestionably the time that I had here was the foundation of that. Now there are some contemporaries here, but let's talk a little bit about the building, right? It is an iconic and mysterious building, isn't it? I mean, it is just quite amazing. And you know the story that I recounted with Mick and his report, Mick McDonough and his report. Well, let me tell you, there was war in the Department of Education. One half of the department wanted it to happen, another didn't. But once they got the political momentum going, they said, right, we're going, right? Part of the reason why maybe it was built at the bottom of the hill rather than the top of the hill where it was supposed to be, right? Isn't that the folklore? You weren't supposed to look down on this building. You were supposed to look up on it. But here's an internal report. In the early days of the construction of the building, within a short time span, a number of problems emerged. There appears to be insufficient provision of fire exits. The dimensions of the squash courts are decidedly out. In a number of places, the headroom in descending and ascending stairs is insufficient. Already one nasty accident has occurred. The staff social area is a complete waste of space. The handball alleys have not been provided. There is considerable shortage of storage space in the building. General finish inside the building is poor. And of course, what the building became known for iconically over the years, the material covering the outside of the gymnasium is falling off. Do you remember that? And the whole place started to peel. So, you know, in many respects, it was a building which at one level, you know, evoked this sense, yes, it's our national college, but then there was also almost a sense of ridicule about some of the things that were going on. But for all of that, for those of us who arrived, and I put my foot in here in 1976, it was like arriving on the Starship Enterprise. I have to tell you, it was just unbelievable. The size of the sports hall, the gymnasium, the pool, 33 metres long, and a diving pit, for God's sake. It was just unbelievable. And so we were totally taken in by this, and we were drawn in. And of course, I'm not going to talk about the wider environment. You know, the pitches, the all-weather, the tennis, the whole lot, not to mention that crowd up the hill in the NIHE, who we really were, you know, it was just absolutely amazing. And so it is, you know, quite an iconic, but it's certainly mysterious building, I think, would be fair to say. And it's wonderful to see it reconditioned in the way it is. And my congratulations to you, the team, and everybody who has been involved in revamping and refurbishing the building. It is superb, bringing it into the next 40 years of this wonderful institution. But I think it's important that when we reflect on these things, the building is important, but the people are essential. And it is the people who have made this institution over the years. They have been absolutely phenomenal. You know, right at the outside there was turmoils, there were strikes, there was sit-ins, there was all sorts of aggravation in many respects. But all the time, regardless of that, the job got done. The graduates got graduated. And increasingly, and by 1990, God knows what the number is now, 790 physical education graduates had graduated into the system. 790 in the size of a country like Ireland. 26,000 people had applied to be students here in that time. So the institution made a huge impact on the whole physical education complexion of the country. And just why I said what I said about South Africa at the start is we can take these things so much for granted, having qualified physical educationists. And please don't just look at the job that they have done in schools, which has been monumental, but take a look at, you know, where else they've gone and the other effects that they've had. And of course, you know, the people who have come to the institution have had huge impact in their own field in so many ways. And I could start listing names, but that would be very dangerous because the list would probably go on all night, I would think. But from the point of view of the whole ethos of the place, I just want to, before I go off the building itself, I mean, it's such a place that I'd say the nooks and crannies here have been used for all sorts of interesting purposes, right? But again, you know, we won't. But I benefited hugely from some of these nooks and crannies. Now, don't go there, right? before you jump in. You know, anytime there was a new project to be bedded. In fact, I see Kieran up there, you know, and Kieran and myself have a lot of history, especially in the PEAI. But, you know, the people who are involved in the student union here got a place right down the back of the building. I don't know if you remember that small little cubby hole at the back of the building. My God, what activity used to go on in that place. In fact, I remember from your office, it was so funny, you know. The time John was great for kind of linking in with the students. His office was way above the student union place. And I remember being up in his office one day, and next minute he gets up and he writes this note and he puts it through one of the vents, and the note floats all the way down into the middle of a student union meeting going on down. So it was quite.
That was to warn you were planning a strike. And my friend Tom Powell knew all about it. So I wasn't going to leave my office because I didn't want to be in on the plot.
That's right.
Otherwise I'd have had to.
But they could trace your handwriting. You had this very distinctive handwriting. So the nooks and crannies were great, and I was to benefit from them subsequently, because actually, John, when I came to work here as a staff member, somebody tried to put me in an office with about 6 different people, and you said, "Oh no, you're not having that," and you found a windowless office down near the Student Union office, which actually subsequently became the office of the PEAI, which of course, became the HQ of the PEAI. Mora and the NCF, got into another nook and cranny somewhere else. So they, the building actually, for a building which it would take, an atomic bomb to break through one of the walls, really. The walls are so thick. We cut a hole in one of the walls up above to make a window in the NCTC. It took them about 3 weeks to get through the wall. It just unbelievably thick, but still it has been incredibly versatile in terms of the purposes that it has been used for. And again, I think it's so hugely fitting that with the vibrancy and the direction which is here in UL and the PESS department, that, hey, here's a new iteration for the next 40 years. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And look, there was great crack as well. It wasn't all hard. I should say, Fergal, you gave a nice description of, the assignments and how hard the work was. So I'm not going to go into that too much. But I do want to say, before or since, I have never worked as hard in those 4 years. It was really tough, but satisfying tough. Between the physicals, Dave Weldrick on your case, PJ getting you going down around the conditioning, John Logan pushing you hard in the education, Jim, and I see Tom Power has walked in, has he? Yeah. Tom, revolutionary. Do you remember micro teaching? Do you remember down where it was and then remember where you moved? That for us was absolutely empowering, groundbreaking stuff. We believed we could do anything as a result of what we were getting. It was really phenomenal. And I think the spirit, the quality, the way in which it was delivered, but probably most importantly, the enduring effect that it has had, speaks for itself. And, to the staff members who are here and those who are not here, and those who sadly have passed on, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks. It was an absolutely superb job done by you all. But we had some crack as well. And pity Anne Sweeney didn't come. We could give her a bit of a ribbon. Kieran McFadden, I think you were behind this story, but you may not have been. But you, of course, you all walked in the front door today, right? And those of you who remember the building of old, remember the steps you had to go up and the big platform on the top? Well, poor old Anne Sweeney arrived one day. She used to get a hard time off the students. And she used to drive these little Bambino cars, tiny little cars, like the smart cars that you see now. But one day, doesn't she come out from her office to find the car had been lifted up onto the top of the steps. Do you remember that? So, there was absolutely, there was great crack altogether, and
the rest of that story. Was it the men's dressing room?
Oh, it was gone into the men's dressing room. All right, sorry, I only.
She was looking for it for 3 days.
All right, she couldn't find it. I'd heard it was up at the top of the steps, but those kinds of things were absolutely legendary. But Kieran as well. I mean, I don't know if it's true, but the days when there was the strife on and Jimmy Oliver was the first, director, and I mean, the talk was that there was a threat issued to kneecap his dog, would you believe it? I don't know what the dog's name was. The dog's name was Mutt, so it was... So, was it Shep?
Sure.
Yeah. So, really wonderful. And I mean, you were talking about the changes. Let me tell you a couple of changes. Some of them are a long time ago, and some of them not so long time ago. John Logan will verify this story. I did my undergraduate dissertation with Mike Sleep, who, by the way, says hello, as does Paul Robinson. Neither of them can be here, but they made contact to say, oh, we hear you're speaking this evening, or on the evening. Please say hello to everyone. So Mike Sleep is currently in Australia on a holiday. Couldn't make it. Paul Robinson is otherwise disposed. But this man was a great help to me, and I don't know if you remember this, but actually I had so much information I was going to have to analyse it on a computer. What? a computer. So he introduced me to all these coding things and so forth. I said, oh yeah, this looks great. But anyway, in the end, of course, it happened that in order to get it into the computer, these punch cards had to be, done, right? So they were sent off to the punch room. I still didn't know what was happening. But anyway, one day, I kid you not, about 4 boxes, oops, I better not do that, 4 boxes about the size of a suitcase come down with the punch cards. You physically helped me bring them over, I don't know if you remember, to the computer room, right? These punch cards. But here's the thing. The computer room was about that size. And the computer just about fitted into the computer. Absolutely unbelievable. So that was 1979. I was doing the thesis. Gym, National Coaching and Training Centre. Liam Dugdale and Dave Mahedy got Charlie Haughey in a corner in Athlone sometime in 95, 96, which led to a report. We said, we should be the national something or other. We started lobbying government at but Frank Fatty was coming for a visit and we said, we have to make a presentation. I kid you not. Jim showed me a technique where we had these slides. He gave me a felt marker. Do you remember this, Jim? He taught me that colour slide for the minister. And we literally, with a felt marker, coloured in, I remember, yellow and blue onto the slide. 1987. So it's not like, it's a whole generation ago, but it just shows you how quickly things move on. One final humorous story. Another gentleman who says hello, and indeed also, in my view, a legend in his lifetime. Again, NCTC link here. Liam Moggan, Deck, who has run how many? 35 tutor courses at the national level since 19, whatever it is. Really great guy, and he was a couple of years ahead of me in college. But in 1979, after I'd submitted the data cards, we said we'd go on a cycling tour to France. And those of you who know Liam, he sometimes drives you mad with all sorts of tales and that. So we're getting on the boat in Dunleary, and he said, God, wouldn't it be great if we met the boys? We're going to France. And we're going to cycle around the Loire Valley. We're going to Paris and we're going to cycle around the Loire Valley for 10 days, right? So we get on the boat and he said, wouldn't it be great if we met the boys? I said, what do you mean? Oh, Joe and Frank are going to Europe. We're going to Europe. Now, Joe Hartnett and Frank Houlihan had left Ireland 3 weeks before. Here's their route. They went to Denmark, Finland, Norway, down through Central Europe, into Italy, and they were coming back to Ireland. And Moggan says, wouldn't it be great if we met the boys? I said, listen, we're going to France, for Christ's sake. We're on bikes, they're in a car. So anyway, we're on our last leg, we're heading back, we're pretty tired, we're heading back up towards France. Of course, I'm 100 metres ahead of Liam. I was always much fitter than him, right? No, I'm only joking. But I'm not joking you, in the wind, I heard his quivering voice saying, the boys, the boys, the boys. And I look around, and I'm not joking you, there was traffic all over the place, right? A yellow Renault does a 180 on the road and spins around and stops in between the two of us. I look back, and who was it? Joe Hartnett and Frank Houlihan. And to prove the story, there it is. That's one of the most extraordinary pictures I've ever been in. And the tree, we had such a laugh, excuse the women in the room, the tree on the right-hand side, we all peed up against that tree together and said, isn't this just unbelievable? and then we took the photo. But they were the types, look, there were, I'd say everyone who's associated would have 100 of those stories. There's a couple of them in the room. I hope you don't mind me saying this, Jim and Catherine, because there's an incredible connection. I live in Bird Hill, right? One of our great jokes was that, oh, did you hear the story? Catherine Bird, Jim Pigeon and Tim Crow were stopped in Bird Hill by the guard. And the guard says, what's your name? So they told them their names, and the guard said, oh yeah, and I'm Robert Redford, Did you get it? Crow, pigeon, bird hill. But anyway, so it is true, yes. So all of those stories, they were just so much with the time.
When they were doing the Karma time, that was the time Karma was kidnapped.
Dr. Raymond.
And they
Yes.
the stone.
Wire.
That was where it was. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Do you mind if I intervene?
Are we nearly done?
If you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly.
Other words, hurry up and finish.
Hurry up. No, for those of you who want gory details, and God, this was pretty poignant. I was able to pick out like we did a reunion after 20 years, and some of the guys had put together some incredible photographs, and there's even a photograph of me and Eddie O'Sullivan here in Tony Watson's lab with nothing but our knickers on, right? So
I wouldn't be showing that off.
It's all right. But they were absolutely tremendous memories. I'm sure I have left out absolutely loads, but I do want to finish off. I want to reiterate again what incredible memories I have of the institution. Certainly for me, both personally and professionally, it has been a huge part of my life. I was counting up actually. Out of the last 40, I've had an association of 27, either as a student, as head of coach education, director of NCTC, and now working with Anne and colleagues on a couple of bits and pieces. And it's just been an amazing influence in my life. I think it's a lot more than an iconic building. I think it's an iconic institution. And I go back to my South Africa story. Remember, we could be, if the 1938 report had been implemented, we could be celebrating 80, not 40, right? Maybe we might be 40 years further along, but we're not. We are for 40 years further along, and there's been absolutely incredible progress made. But I think everybody in this room knows that there are new challenges, new horizons, and a new set of issues to take on. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that the building has been recommissioned to do this. I think it's really important that we celebrate the heritage of the institution. What a great idea to have the opening and have everybody back. And I think most importantly, probably the friendships and the memories. And I'd really like to wish you and the team and all involved in this newly refurbished building in creating another 40 years of fantastic work and brilliant memories. Thank you very much.